you check the children. Show a little match sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil, Laird, and I'm here to review the brand new release, In a Violent Nature. Now, this is a film that received a lot of hype and buzz leading up to its release due to its performance on the festival circuit, and then some early screenings got some further buzz over the last 1 to 2 weeks, and it finally released today for general audiences, and I went and saw the earliest screening I could, and so I am here to talk about this film that is basically a slasher film from the 80s that is told from the perspective of the killer, or at least it follows the slasher the whole time. Not necessarily from his perspective, like his POV, but it is following him the whole time, and so that's what we're going to get into. And I gotta say, starting off right out of the gate, I really enjoyed this film. I loved so many aspects of this film. I had a couple of gripes, and then I had a section of the movie that unfortunately hampered my overall enjoyment of it. But overall, this, even considering that little section of the film, I really loved this. I had such a great time, and I think anyone that is a fan of slashers from the 80s and even into the 90s, because those 80s slashers and even 70s slashers bled into the 90s and even beyond. So anyone that likes any of those kinds of movies, specifically the Friday the 13th films, even though this is not a Friday the 13th film, personally, I am going to look at it as such, because this would have been absolutely jaw-droppingly perfect if it was a Jason movie told in this way. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and it is its own thing, so I have to judge it based on what it is instead of what I want it to be. But what it is still very entertaining and very worth your time, in my opinion. Starting off with the story, it is very simply the other half of a 80s slasher movie, a slasher in the woods story, but told from the killer's perspective. So right from the jump, you kind of see this killer resurrected and how it happens, and then you follow the killer until, the end of the film. And I won't say exactly what happens, but that is the overall story of the film, interwoven with the group of kids that he ends up stalking along the way for a very particular reason. But that is the long and short of the story without spoiling anything for you guys. And I don't want to spoil anything for you guys because it's such an enjoyable little treat. Yes, it's predictable in the sense that you've seen slasher movies before, so you kind of know what's coming. The nice thing is it's told from a completely different perspective this time around. So the killer kind of wanders in and out of the typical tropes that we see in other slasher movies, and that makes it, for me, really entertaining. I don't know if everyone will like this film as much as I did, but this film was made for people raised on the Friday the 13th movies and other slashers of its ilk. So I think it's really, really fun for that, from that perspective alone. But yeah, that's the long and short of the story. You follow the killer on his side of a typical slasher movie. And then the acting is what I should get into. Well, my appreciation of the story is this. I enjoyed how it played out because it was for me. It was for someone that loves these kinds of slasher movies. So even though it wasn't the deepest of films, it was very much up the alley for someone like myself that loves these kinds of movies. And all I want at this point in my life, right? I'm on in my years. I'm over 40. And so I just want to see something new nowadays, right? Something that's not the same over and again. And even though this is a slasher movie, this is a completely new perspective on a slasher movie, which makes it, that by itself makes it worth its weight in gold almost. Luckily, the filmmaking, made it worthwhile to be able to say such a thing about this film. So yeah, I'll just segue into that before I get into the acting. The overall story, I very much enjoyed how it played out, but it was very much assisted by the filmmaking. All of the shots were beautiful. Some of them were very reminiscent of slasher movies we've seen before. So it's not like a lockdown camera. It's not over the shoulder of the killer the entire time. they do take some artistic license with how they present this, even though it's technically from the killer's perspective. But that's fine. It didn't bother me at all, and I don't think it'll bother you at all. It still very much plays the way it advertises itself to play. Along with the cinematography, the sound design was amazing. It obviously, this is one of those examples of a film where the sound design helps tell the story, because it orients you to the things around the people you're watching at the time, whether it be the killer himself or his victims that he's stalking along the way. So sound design was really incredible. I don't remember a huge amount of score, which for a movie like this, I think that makes sense. There probably was some, and I'm not saying it's bad because I didn't notice it. I'm just saying I was keyed in to what was on screen so much that I didn't take particular note of the score. So there you go. That's as much as I can say about that. But the sound design is fantastic, and it assists the story the whole way. The acting was all very entertaining. There's not that much to speak of, right? Because again, you're showing from the killer's perspective, and in most slasher movies, the killer doesn't appear that much, so there's not that much crossover between the victims and the killer, so there's not that much opportunity for the victims to like really show who their characters are or anything like that. You have to go into this expecting that, but the acting is still it's still great. The hammy people, the hammy victims are still very entertaining, and they don't pull me out of the film by any stretch. So yeah, the acting was very enjoyable the whole way through. So yeah, I mean, realistically, you guys, what I like most about this, before I get into the effects, because that's a very big thing, what I liked most about this film is the approach and the execution. I was worried about the pacing, because it's an hour and a half long movie, but in a slasher movie, if you're following the slasher the whole time, you're going to have some downtime. You're going to be following him walking for a great amount of actual minutes. But in this one, they do kind of jump forward as he walks, so you show the passage of time and the passage of distance. So they handle that very well. So, the way the film is executed is top notch. The effects are really interesting and engaging and very well done. It's largely, if not completely, practical effects. If there is any non-practical, it's just to accentuate the practical effects that are there. Again, if that happened. But that goes to speak to the quality of the effects, in that if I can't say definitively that, yeah, there was digital effects added to make everything look a little bit better, that's how good the effects are, right? The best effects are invisible effects. They're effects that people don't know are there. And this one, if it wasn't practical at any point, I didn't really notice it. So all the practical gore was great. I do need to touch on the fact that there is one particular kill that got a bunch of hype leading into this film. Supposedly people were getting sick seeing it. It was a good kill, but it didn't knock my socks off the way it apparently knocked so many people's socks off. But I've seen a lot of shit in my time, so it wasn't... It was unique. I hadn't seen it before, but I've seen stuff similar to it before. And unfortunately, anatomically, it didn't really work that well for me. It was shot very much in close-up, and I think that reason for that is because it wouldn't look great if you got a wider shot of it. But, they kept it close, and they kept it visceral, and I think that's why it worked for a lot of people. Just didn't work as well for me, but it was still a good kill. It was still a unique kill. And actually, the two main kill sequences that we get, both of them are pretty unique. And I really appreciated both of them. The second one almost as much, if not more so, than the first one, because the second one is really great about building tension and delivering and stuff. So that's as much as I want to say about that, but the effects were top notch. This movie is very worth your while. I don't know that you necessarily have to rush to the theater to see it, but all horror fans, and especially slasher fans, I think owe it to themselves to see this, because it's a perspective they've never seen before on a film like this. There might be times where you feel like it's dragging on. I personally didn't feel that, because I knew things had to happen. I knew the killer had to get from A to B, and they did shorten those, but it all made sense to me. There was one moment towards the end of the film that I think belabored the movie way too long. I won't say anything beyond that, but I felt the length during this one scene, and that was a bummer because, because for reasons I can't really say, but it was a bummer. So there you go, guys. That's going to do it for my non-spoiler thoughts on In a Violent Nature. If you've seen it, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Try and keep it spoiler-free so we can keep it fun for anyone that hasn't seen the movie that's checking out this review. But if you have seen it, and you're willing to give me your spoiler-free thoughts, let me know what your thoughts are in those comments down below. Thank you very much to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Until next time, though, I've been Cecil Laird, and remember, stay scared.